Well, let's go to some more mechanical or interesting ceremonial aspects of what's happening over the next few days, but particularly reports that the King wants to trim the entourage. He wants a more slimmed down royal family. But on the issue of the councillors of state, much has been made of that here in Britain. To explain for people at home, these are members of the royal family who can stand in or deputise for the sovereign. There's been a bit of controversy and news here in England because you've got people like Prince Harry and the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, in the drop of people who can stand in as councillors of state, but omissions like the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, who is much loved and hard working. It's not decided by the monarch, it's instead designated by the line of succession. So will that change? Well, that's a hot talk here in London. Joining us now is royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, this, I'm making the point, it's making headlines. It doesn't seem for Australians perhaps to be front of mind, but it is a talking point here in Britain. Who will be these councillors of state? Can these rules perhaps be modernised? And can we move Duke of York out of the way and put Princess Royal in?
It's a very sensible question. I have to say that I've been asking it myself for some months, and that is if we could just go back a little period of time. As you know, the Queen was suffering from mobility issues since last October. What happened and what brought this issue to the front was a period of time ago when, as you know, Prince Philip is no longer with us, so the Queen's consort automatically as a Councillor of State wasn't. Subsequent to that, it was Prince Charles, Prince William, and then Prince Harry and Prince Andrew. The problem with that happened to be that at one point, Prince Charles had COVID, Prince William was in the United Arab Emirates. Had the Queen suffered any form of incapacity at that time, it would have been up to Prince Harry or Prince Andrew, neither of whom fit the bill. The other problem is, of course, this has to be changed back to Parliament, but I'm delighted it's getting some prominence, because indeed it should be changed if, in point of fact, they've added Princess Beatrice and, of course, now the consort, the Queen consort, Camilla. The problem with this is that the Parliament has to change it, and the royal family particularly sensitive about issues, royal issues being raised in Parliament. You know, you bring it up, you never know what else comes up. But this is something that's fundamental, because if you have two persons in that list, one of whom is in disgrace and has stepped down from all royal duties, and the other who has stepped down, and indeed there's a rift still, one must hope for a reconciliation. That's another issue, of course, with the royal family. It's not a satisfactory situation. Indeed, he should deal with it.
Now, inevitably, King Charles is going to want to see as many countries as possible, as soon as possible. The opportunity literally is going to be taking place today, about as many world leaders as possible. There's been one-on-one meetings, there'll be different receptions, a meeting with the President of the United States. You get a feeling that he'll be in Australia much sooner rather than later. A new monarch does want to hit the ground running, but unlike the previous time when it was Queen Elizabeth, when she was setting out as Queen, travel's very different. You can literally fly to the other side of the world in Australia in the best part of a day. Do you expect to see quite a cracking pace from a new king trying to visit as many places as possible in the Commonwealth?
Well, yes, I think he's going to continue what we've seen with Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland and Wales, just as an example of talk about hitting the ground running. That was positively levitating, and he needed a day's rest, and I'm delighted he got it. And indeed, I think what's been done now in Britain, I think it will be done as soon as possible in the Commonwealth. Also, in the wider world, a royal personage and a royal trip is the best projection of British soft power. Around the Commonwealth, it's absolutely pivotal, especially with 15 countries, including Britain, still keeping the monarchy.
Now, Peter, we just saw Prime Minister Anthony Albanese meeting with His Majesty. Are these very brief conversations? Is there a level of briefing that goes into them? Tell us about a Prime Minister and beyond the pleasantries. What is happening?
So usually you are aware from the palace some of the issues they might have an interest in. I certainly have been privy to briefings for then the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister in Australia in and around the margins of Choggum. It's considered a formal audience. They will raise things with an Australian Prime Minister. You don't necessarily get notice on some of the topics that will be there. It's usually genial. Certainly I know Mr Abbott said how well across they were of domestic Australian politics. Not politics in party politics, but all the issues that were in the current affairs climate at the time. If there'd been floods, if there'd been fires, Australians doing well at particular things like an Olympics, those sorts of things come up. I've noticed today, Richard, yes, we've got this reception and all the world leaders will be there. These one-on-ones we're seeing on the screen now involving the Australian Prime Minister and the New Zealand Prime Minister are in recognition of our status as a realm. There's also, though, the first of what will be weekly audiences between the King and Liz Truss. Of course, they've met and there's been that condolence interaction very early on following the Queen's death. But this will now be the rhythm of her Prime Ministership. Give Australians a sense. We don't have these weekly meetings necessarily between Prime Ministers and Governor-General. What's involved in these audiences?
What's involved in these audiences is a one-to-one between the monarch, King Charles, and the sitting Prime Minister, the Queen, of course. There were 15 served, of course, the most recent only for a couple of days. The facts are, however, that no one ever knows or is supposed to know what happened at these meetings.
So no note takers, no one's in the room, nothing's recorded?
Absolutely not. But, of course, rumour spreads like wildfire. And what, in fact, since PR is part and parcel of all our lives, including, of course, those of every politician, they spread reports as to what their relationship really was like with the Queen. It could be said that Churchill's obviously was extremely good. There's no doubt he saw her in a romantic way. Harold Wilson, she was very fond of, and there's little doubt again that that was the case. But when it comes, as I say, this is totally secretive between, say, the Queen and Margaret Thatcher. There are books practically, positively, been written about the supposed difference of view. There was certainly a difference of emphasis between the women, but there was tremendous respect, and I think that was shown by the fact the Queen attended Margaret Thatcher's funeral and also gave her the Order of Merit. But these particular audiences are rather like the red boxes with dispatch papers that every monarch has to look through, rather like the fact they have to sign every bill into law or open Parliament. These are things King Charles will have to do. Would he, or could he, or might he? The question is, he can't campaign. Would he highlight any issues like the environment? Now, that's what I was reading in the papers, that this is the sort of thing that he would like to do. To what extent he would be permitted to do it is quite another thing. It's a Christmas broadcast where he can give his own view.
Well, correct, but also, we don't know how Her Majesty did it. I mean, if the rules are nobody could say what happened in the room, she may well have been, that's the moment where, well, OK, not getting specific about tax policy, perhaps, but having a bit of an overall view. And also, it's, I suppose, the one element of the apprenticeship that has not been public. Now, you've seen him deliver a Queen's speech. You've seen him deliver, step in and open a whole series of things, from the Commonwealth Games to Commonwealth meetings, all the rest of it. But what sort of an insight do you think that she would have given him about these one-on-one meetings, these prime ministerial meetings? Do you think that he was able to sit in to some degree, or because of the nature of these things, it is one-on-one, and she just tells him what to expect? Because obviously he's starting cold there.
Oh yes, there's no doubt it's a one-on-one, so he wouldn't have sat in, but he certainly is the most experienced Prince of Wales, because of course the longevity of the role, the fact he created it for himself in our unwritten constitution, it isn't defined. However, there's no question that anything can be raised in these meetings. Equally, were prime ministers to leak things, and David Cameron was a shocker. Firstly, he told former Mayor of New York, Abe Bloomberg, how the Queen purred down the line after the Scottish referendum, and secondly, to sell his autobiography, he revealed the fact that he'd asked the palace to tip a wink, so to speak, on the eve of the Scottish referendum, thus leading to the Queen's request to the Scottish people that they should think carefully. Now, that is the sort of thing you do not want, and it was not appreciated by the palace, and I'm sure she didn't appreciate Boris Johnson's prorogation of Parliament, which he had to sign, which was later ruled illegal by all 11 Supreme Court judges.
Of the relationships that exist behind the scenes, all people, all with the other complicated things that happen. Thank you very much. Lovely to see you as always. We'll talk again in the next little while.